So Councillor Santos, you can proceed to chair today's meeting.
Thank you very much, and good afternoon, and welcome to our virtual meeting of Brampton's Audit Committee. We will begin the meeting with the City Clerk calling the roll for attendance at today's meeting.
So Acting Chair Santos is present. Councillor Medeiros? Councillor Medeiros? I'll come back to you, Councillor Medeiros. Councillor Bowman? Councillor Bowman?
I'm here, Peter. Can you hear me?
Yes, thank you. Councillor Vicente?
I'm here.
Thank you. Councillor Singh?
I'm here.
Member Iqbal Ali?
I'm here.
Thank you. And Councillor Medeiros? Okay, Councillor Medeiros is here. You're sounding a little faint, your audio, but all members, or excuse me, 6 members are here, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Mr. Clerk. Our next item is approval of the agenda. Does any member wish to add a business item to today's meeting? If so, please use the chat function to add your name to the speakers list. I'm going to open up that chat function now. Okay, I don't see anyone adding anything. We have a motion moved by Councillor Bowman to approve the agenda. If you're okay with that, Councillor Bowman. Instead of seeking a recorded vote for this item, I will ask if there are anyone opposed to this motion. Otherwise, your vote will count in the affirmative. Is there anyone opposed to the motion to approve the agenda? Seeing no objections, the motion carries. Do any members, next item of the agenda is declarations of conflict of interest under the Municipal Conflict of Interest Act. Do any members have a declaration of pecuniary interest under the Municipal Conflict of Interest Act for any matter to be considered on today's agenda? Seeing none, the clerk will so note for the meeting minutes. Consent. The next item is item 4, the consent motion. Does any member wish to add an item to the consent motion today? If so, please use the chat function and add your name to the speakers list. There are no additions to the consent agenda. I have a motion moved by Councillor Singh to approve the consent motion. If there's no opposition, your vote will count in the affirmative. Seeing no objections, the motion carries. Next item is presentation and delegations. There are no delegations or presentations on today's agenda. Next item is 6.1, reports from internal audit. 6.1 is a staff report regarding the internal audit charter. This item was deferred from our last meeting in June. Do any members have any questions or comments regarding the staff report? If so, please use the chat function to add your name to the speakers list.
I do have a question, but I don't know where the chat function to add my name.
The chat function is if you scroll your arrow down, the menu pops up and you just hit that chat bubble. And it should pop up on the side. But I do have Councillor Bowman and Member Iqbal. I will have you next. So Councillor Bowman, go ahead, followed by Iqbal.
Thank you very much, Madam Chair. Am I loud and clear? Everyone can hear me? Yes?
Yeah.
Okay. Madam Chair, you can hear me? Just nod, I can see you. Okay, thanks. I still have issues with this report, and I brought this forward last meeting we had, and it's on, there's 2 areas, one in the functional reporting where it says reported to division head through the CAO. And I still feel that the audit committee and the auditor in general should be reporting to council, not through the CAO. And it goes on to say that for objectives of the committee are to ensure impartial, objective, and independent review of the processes of the city's operations, and that the CAO will be advised prior to internal audit sharing any audit reports with the audit committee. I have a major problem with that. That is not transparent. I don't think that's what our audit committee should be. The audit committee should be totally free to make any findings that they want and be reporting directly to council, not through anybody else, before council hears what their reports are. So I cannot support this as it's written, and I don't think there's been any changes to it since the last time we had a committee meeting. And I remember that there was a couple of citizen members that were also opposed to it. So I'll wait to hear their comments as well. Thanks.
Thank you. Is there anyone on staff who wanted to comment in response to Councillor Bowman?
I can, Councillor Santos. If that's okay.
Yeah, go ahead.
Oh, thank you. So just want to reiterate, number one, Councillor Bowman is correct. Nothing has changed since it was deferred. It was deferred, and what you have before you is exactly what was before you at the last meeting. The second point is what is in the internal audit charter is exactly what audit committee and council asked and has been vetted by legal, and that is to align the charter with the various bylaws of the city as well as legislation. So staff fully complied with the direction of council. And I would add, you know, KPMG did their report as well. That is, I'd say, somewhat tied to this conversation. And there may be value in hearing from them first and referring back to this afterwards, because they may have some additional information that committee may find valuable as part of this discussion. But I would say what Councillor Bowman is suggesting is perfectly legitimate, but it's not something that can be done simply through an audit charter change. To have the auditor report directly to council is really that auditor general model, which was debated and discussed by the previous term of council. And so with the director of internal audit function, they have to report somewhere. And in this case, it's the CAO. And by the way, it's always been that way here. The director of audit's always reported to the CAO. And so this is not new. This is just providing that clarity and the clarity that council has directed us to do. Thank you.
Do I still have the floor, Madam Chair?
Yeah, sure. Go ahead, Councillor Bowman.
Yeah, just thank you for responding to that, David. What I'm talking about here is essentially these words that the CAO will be advised prior to internal audit sharing any internal audit reports with committee. There's no way that should be happening. There's no way that those reports should not be viewed by anybody else before they come to council for approval. You know, and I agree that I don't have an issue with the auditor physically reporting to someone else, whether it be the CAO or whether it be the mayor or whoever it is. But these words that to me say that reports will be coming to somebody else first before they come to council. I don't agree with that. The reports that come from internal audit should be presented directly to council, unadulterated, unread by anybody else, and unchanged if that happens. Now, it also says in there, under the selection and dismissal, stat audit functions, that the audit committee is the audit committee is responsible for selection and dismissal, of the city's statutory auditor in accordance with Section 296 of the Municipal Act. So I don't know if that's changed either. But if we're going to be open and transparent, then any reports that come from the auditor have to be coming to council first. And that's my whole point. I'm not talking about a physical reporting structure for who does their attendance and you know, who does their agreements and things like that. I'm talking about physical reports that come to council that may or may not have to heard in closed session as well. Thanks.
Anything further from the CAO staff on those comments? If not, Member Iqbal, you have, oh,
Thanks, Madam Chair. I have similar concerns brought forward by Councillor Bowman. I have three questions. All of them are related, but in a different context. So when I look at the report, the proposed terms of reference of Audit Committee, that strips away some of the key functions of the Audit Committee. That includes approving decisions regarding the appointment and removal of the Chief Audit Executive. Right now, the title is changed from CAE to Internal Auditor. Reviewing, approving the Office of Internal Auditor budget, the work plan, and the CAO reviewing the performance of the internal auditor and internal auditor functions, and also reviewing, approving the decisions related to just 1 second, my screen just went away. Give me a minute. Bear with me 1 second, screen went away. Yeah, so reviewing and approving the decisions related to the remuneration of the internal audit. So the proposed internal audit charter recommends the functions reporting to the internal auditor report to the CEO, where I have a concern with that in terms of the administrative functions. And also it includes the appointment, dismissal, remuneration of the internal auditor. So it takes away the key mandate of the audit committee, and also by making this fundamental change, it compromises the independency of the internal auditor and the internal audit function. So my question is that how the internal auditor will be able to maintain the objectivity and the independence if the CAO is responsible for the general management of the affairs of the internal audit division and has the unilateral authority to appoint, dismiss, and set the remuneration to the internal auditors. That's my first question.
If anyone wants to respond, and then I also see on the speakers list, Councillor Singh would be next.
I have two more questions.
Okay, thanks, Iqbal, go ahead.
So the Institute of Internal Audit guidelines states, and that supports the independence of the Chief Audit Executive by reporting functionally to a governing body, in our case is an audit committee, and also administratively to the executive management. So if that is the case, are we, by making or proposing the functional change to the CAO, are we in violation or ignoring the guidelines of the Institute of Internal Audit? So that's another question. So the third question is, looking at the independency and the objective of the internal audit, it remains free of conditions that threatens the ability to carry out its activities and in an unbiased manner by the internal auditor. So by moving the functional reporting to the CAO, the internal auditor becomes a management function similar to any other program under the CAO. So my question is, how could the internal auditor perform his or her duties freely, independently, and how could the internal auditor brings forward the findings of the audit committee without any fear or reprimand? So those are my three questions. So based on this, it is not very clear. It's a fundamental shift from what we have. So I'm not in favor of this report, and I don't want to support the report as well. That's my stand.
Okay, thank you, Iqbal. CAO or any members of staff wish to respond to some of the questions asked, and then I have Councillor Singh on the board as well.
Okay. Through the chair, can I make a comment, please?
Yeah, sure. Go ahead, Satinder.
Okay. So on page 3 of the charter, functional reporting, we talk about that the findings, conclusions, and recommendations resulting from the work conducted by internal audit will be reported to the appropriate division head and or commissioner through the CAO. On a quarterly basis, all audit reports, open and in camera, will be presented to the audit committee for their review. All open audit reports will be published on City of Brampton's website. Then on page 4, Again, just an answer to Councillor Bowman. When we say all audit reports, CEO will be advised prior to the internal audit, sharing internal reports and on related information audit committee, this is a flow of information since I joined. Actually, once we finalize the reports and get the management sign off, then my coordinator puts everything on the system we have, agenda.net. And then I go through, make sure all the reports are there and approved, and then CAO gets it, and then city clerks send it to all members, councillor and citizen members. So I never go to CAO asking which report I should submit, and even my coordinator never asked me, is there a report you don't want to put? Once the report is done, discussed with the commissioner, signed off by commissioner or director of the department, whoever is ahead, it becomes a document that needs to go to audit committee. So those are my 2 cents in it. Thank you.
Councillor Santos, if I may add as well, I just want to, reassert the clarity here, because the premise of the questions are incorrect. And that is that there is no move to changing reporting. There's no moving the functional reporting to the CAO here. To be explicit, that's the way it's always been. Now, that's why Audit Committee and Council directed staff to clarify the language to reflect the reality and the legislation. That's what this is. So I just want to be very firm on, there's been no change. There's no moving reporting here. That's the way it's been, and we follow direction to align those policies. Now, committee and council, I'm at your service, and audit is at your service, but the legislation is clear on, you can't have a foot on the dock and a foot in the boat on this regards. If you want complete independence, it's an auditor general model. And again, council can have that debate and will happily comply. And they had that last term. If you don't, then this is the model that you've always had. Thank you.
Thank you, CAO Barrick, and I see Councillor Singh followed by Councillor Bowman, but just very quickly, I do remember the committee giving direction to staff to update the internal audit charter to what it is supposed to be and to eliminate any confusion that might have existed before. And just very quickly, I did also review the debate regarding the Auditor General versus the internal auditor situation from the previous term when that vote happened. And it was clear at that time that they did not want an Auditor General, that they wanted an internal auditor. But what wasn't clear in that debate was whether or not legally what they came up with made any sense, or whether or not it was aligned with the regulations in the Municipal Act. And based on what I saw, there was a misalignment, which is why we directed staff to update the internal audit charter to make it aligned with what it's supposed to be. Councillor Singh.
I was just gonna suggest, as David said, to have KPMG also report before we vote on this, just to get an objective third party also, their opinion. I think it'll be valuable for everyone.
Thank you, Councillor Singh, for that suggestion. I would have to agree with that because there are pieces in that particular third-party report that also emphasize the need for us to update the internal audit charter. There is some information in there as well. Councillor Bowman?
Thank you very much. Just in response to what David was saying, there is legislation. There is legislation about either an auditor general or an internal auditor. The legislation does not say that any reports written by an internal auditor are to be reviewed by the CAO first. That's what it does not say. One of the objectives of this committee, and I think it's on page 3, says this committee is responsible for ensuring impartial, objective, and independent review of the processes of city operations. That means that those reports should be coming to the committee and coming to council, not to somebody else who's going to read these reports first. And I'm not saying that anybody would do anything untoward at all. But if we're going to be transparent and we're going to be clear, and we want clarity to all the residents that everything is above board in this city when it comes to audit, those reports need to come to the committee and to council first. That's what I'm saying. And that's not written in the, to my understanding of the act, that's not written into the Municipal Act. Thanks.
And I'm not sure if, to Councillor Singh's point, which I agree with, I'm not sure if KPMG is available at the moment, and also maybe some help from the clerk. Councillor Singh brings up a good point in that there's some stuff in the KPMG report, the third-party review, that also parallels to some of the stuff we're discussing right now with internal audit charter. I'm wondering how we may proceed, given that report is further down in the agenda.
Through you, Madam Chair, if the committee wishes to bring forward item 6.6, which is the staff report and quality assurance review of the internal audit function, I think prepared by KPMG. There is a representative from KPMG, Nicholas Rolfe, who is in today's session. And if committee wishes to just vary the order to bring that forward to hear from him as part of this particular item, then that's fair for committee to do that.
Chair, do I have the floor? I have another point that I want to raise it.
Thank you, Member Iqbal. I think I'm just going to see at the moment if the committee members are okay with us bringing forward that agenda item regarding the KPMG report, so we could also get some of the comments from the third-party auditor about this particular issue, as it does deal with governance. If committee members are okay with it. Okay, if you oppose, just let me know in the chat box. If not, I would ask that we bring forward that particular agenda item and have KPMG staff available for comment. Okay, Member Iqbal, go ahead with your question, and I'm going to assume, Mr. Clerk, that suffices in terms of bringing that report.
So I still have a main concern in terms of shifting everything from the audit committee to the CAO, both functional reporting as well as the administrative reporting. By doing so, it becomes pretty much a management function. The internal audit becomes a management function, and that heavily compromises the independency of the internal auditor. So the fact that City of Brampton doesn't have an auditor general model, and it is in all likelihood the elected council members want to hear an independent report coming from the internal auditor. So it is very much important that that role has to be clearly defined, that the internal auditor functionally reports to the audit committee, and also the fact that the appointment, the dismissal, everything has to be done by the audit committee. So my concern still, I'm not being convinced of the fact that the internal auditor will be able to maintain the independency by moving both the key functions, both administration as well as the functional reporting under the CAO. That's the major concern I have.
Okay, thank you, Member Iqbal. I will pass this over to staff if they wish to comment, and also to the third-party auditors from KPMG, perhaps providing some comments based on your third-party review related to the inconsistencies and possible non-compliance related to governance structure. That would be great.
Councillor Santos, so if I may, David here, and then I'm happy to pass to either KPMG or the Director of Internal Audit. Again, and hearing the citizen committee members' commentary, clarifying there's no change. There's no change in reporting. It's maintaining the existing structure. So I need to highlight that again. The commentary continues to be made about some kind of change. There is no change. The second aspect is Councillor Bowman's consideration to in fact shift reporting of the audit reports directly to audit committee is in fact the AG model. So if the reporting goes directly to the committee or council, that is the AG model. Again, the case has always been the CAO submits all reports to committee and council. To have that operational awareness and to be able to answer those questions that committee or council may have. So when an audit is presented, the findings are there, and the questions are automatically, what is staff doing about it? And so it's difficult to answer the what is staff doing about it question when there's not that line of sight or that operational awareness. Again, so if the committee and council want reporting directly to committee council, that's the Auditor General model, we're happy to comply. My recommendation is we'll require a vote of council to that model, or certainly further diligence or reconsideration of that comment. And so I don't know if the director has anything else, or KPMG to weigh in on some of the other aspects of the committee governance structure.
Hi there, it's Nick Rolfe here from KPMG. Would you like me to just provide some input as well?
That would be great. Thanks, Nick.
Okay, great. Good afternoon, everyone. No, I think it's a great discussion and great debate. So I can understand the points being made today. What I would like to say is that there are a variety of different approaches to how internal audit is set up and structured, and that includes the Auditor General model that has already been talked about. And I will just reiterate as well that this isn't a change in any previous structure. This reporting relationship has existed in the past, where the Director of Internal Audit is reporting through the CAO. But I think providing those reports to the Audit Committee are still fundamentally meeting the aspects of the Institute of Internal Audit standards. And I think there are a few other things that support and should support the committee's confidence in this structure as well. The first is the Director of Internal Audit that you've appointed. The previous one you had in place are either members of the Institute of Internal Audit or are CPAs and have other relevant qualifications for the role. Those roles actually require, and they have a code of ethics that require independent and appropriate reporting as such. So you should have confidence in the individual that is appointed, presuming that they have those qualifications, which yours does and has had it in the past as well. So that should give you some confidence that you will receive independent and unbiased reporting. Secondly, you have the charter that clearly states and sets out the independence of internal audit from management. It's free of bias, and it will report its findings to the audit committee. So that is a further clarification. The other thing that we also recommended, so this would be a change, and this is something that we recommended in our report. We would highly recommend that the audit committee has in-camera sessions with the Director of Internal Audit. So this would give the audit committee members the opportunity to ask questions directly to the Director of Internal Audit without management present. And at that point, you would be able to ask any particularly sensitive or other types of questions that would enable you to ensure that you are comfortable with the independence and objectivity of the internal auditor as well, and also get their views on how the reports have been received and how the reports are being actioned on behalf of management. So I do think that is an important consideration that the committee should also take into account. And then just to address the point on management seeing the reports first, I would have to say I would find it incredibly unusual for a Director of Internal Audit to take reports directly to the audit committee without management having seen them first. That is because during the reporting process for an internal audit, you need, in order to have an effective internal audit process and function. I do this with many other organizations. I lead co-sourced and outsourced internal audit to a variety of different organizations across Ontario in the public sector. I would find it incredibly unusual if the audit committee was asking me to take reports to the audit committee first before having them discussed and agreed with management. Now, that being said, there can be disagreements and there can be times where the auditor does not agree with management. And that would be clearly stated in the report. So for every issue that is identified, every recommendation that is raised, management should be preparing an action plan that basically says, yes, we agree with this recommendation. this is the action we're going to take, this is the action owner, and this is the date it will be completed. At that point, management do have the opportunity to disagree or say, no, we're not willing to take this action. We don't believe this action is necessary. We don't have the resources or anything, and we don't believe that the risk is significant. So at that point, if there is disagreement in the report, the internal auditor will clearly state that, and that will be provided in the report to the audit committee. So I think that is a really, really important step, that management have to be bought into the internal audit and the process. They have to be bought into the action plans that are being set to improve any issues and any recommendations that have been identified during the reporting process. So I would strongly advise, in order to have an effective internal audit function, there has to be a reporting process, an independent reporting process through management. That also comes obviously at some point through to the audit committee. But it is important to have that check with management first to make sure there are no factual inaccuracies in the report. But I would say that normally I would be taking reports to management first and then reporting through to the audit committee at a later date.
Thank you so much, Nick. And so, just for my own clarification as chair, and for clarification for the members, council members and citizen members who are present, nothing has changed in terms of the reporting structure of the internal audit function from the previous charter to this charter. Or the reporting structure has always been the internal auditor reports to the CAO. Is that correct?
That is my understanding, yep.
And so really the only thing that has changed from what was in the previous term to this term really is who the CAO is. Is that correct?
Yep.
So, but the
actual,
and the
director of internal audit too, as well.
And the director of internal audit has changed as well. So in terms of governance structure and who reports to who, as a third-party auditor, it is your understanding that nothing has changed in terms of reporting.
Yep.
Okay. Thank you. And so we do still have the internal audit charter before us. Mr. Iqbal, I see that you on the board to speak. Was that from previously, or would you like to speak again?
Yeah, I would like to speak again. I get it. I understand the reporting of the internal auditor. I totally get it. Coming from one of the municipality, I totally understand. The internal auditor normally meet with the division heads with the findings, and they get the management response, and then they bring it to the audit committee, and that goes to the audit, the council. My concern is on the appointment, dismissal, remuneration, performance of the internal auditor function, which is now under the audit committee, is now moving to the CAO. So that compromises the independency of the internal auditor. And my concern is that how the internal auditor will be able to function and maintain the independency when that function becomes a management function under the CAO with the full authority of hiring, dismissal, and remuneration and work plan, everything. So everything has been shifted now from the audit committee to the CAO, and the internal auditor become another management staff to the internal auditor, sorry, to the CAO. So that's my main concern.
But I do believe there are, oh, sorry, apologies.
Go ahead, Nick.
I do believe there are some mitigations to that, though. Like the director has direct and unfettered access to the chair and vice chair, and presumably the whole committee as well. So if there are issues that would need to be brought up, they would have it in their obligations as a qualified and experienced individual that they would have to report those items if there were significant concerns or other issues that were not being brought through the reports, or that they had their independence compromised, they would have to report that through those direct interactions or those in-camera sessions that you would potentially have in place. So I do think there are mitigations to that risk that would satisfy it to a satisfactory level.
Okay, thank you, Nick. Anything further, Mr. Iqbal?
Yes, so still thank you, Nicola. I understand that, but still I'm not convinced that when it becomes under the CAO, authority of recruitment, dismissal, and performance and remuneration, why would and how would a person directly reporting to the CAO come and approach the the audit committee chair or members of the audit committee without any fear of reprimand? So that's the concern. So the fact that the audit committee keeps the dismissal, recruitment, and remuneration is just to maintain the independency and give the assurance to the auditor that he or she will be able to bring the concerns directly, and there will not be any reprimand or the punishment. So that's the safety net that's been taken out in this process. That's my thought.
Thank you, Iqbal. Any further comments from staff or from KPMG to respond? If not, I'll move on to Councillor Singh. Councillor Singh.
Just for a process, did we move 6.6 up? And
Yes, we did.
okay, so if nobody has questions, can I just move that report and then I'll go to 6.1?
Does anyone have any further comments or questions related to item 6.6, the quality assurance review of the internal audit function? Any questions about that? I would like to, if you can, Nick, since you're here, because there are some recommendations that are in that quality assurance review. Would you mind just taking the committee through what some of those key highlights and recommendations are in order for us to improve the internal audit function here at the City of Brampton?
Absolutely, I'd be delighted to do that. I would firstly like to, state that I do think there are some strengths to this internal audit function compared to what I've seen in other municipalities and other organizations with which I work. So I do think the internal audit manual you have, I believe the new director has really hit the ground running with regards to getting a number of these issues already addressed. So while this was a kind of point in time assessment, it was looking back at the last few years of internal audit work. I do believe there has already been a lot of progress made in terms of actually addressing these areas that we've identified here. So I would just like to set the scene with that. So if I could maybe just turn, I believe I've got the page numbers right here. So page 59 of your package sets out the summary of the results from across the different standards. So as you'll see, there's a number of green areas, which is good. There are a number of yellow areas which are where there are some opportunities for improvement. So really, there's some of the elements that I'll talk about will address those areas in the yellow boxes. So just turning to page 60, so governance of the internal audit function. I think this is an important one, and there's already been some great discussion and great debate on the internal audit charter, and you're already starting to address that. So I think getting the charter agreed and approved is really a really good step, and I think having these active discussions really will support that process as well. We also suggest an education session for some of the audit committee members on the role of the function, the mandate, and the types of questions that audit committee members might consider. Obviously, you have a number of very qualified citizen members on there as well, but I think it would be helpful to potentially support, and this is something we've seen other organizations do in supporting those that maybe have less internal audit experience or less audit experience. Maybe it would be helpful to have some support and just a bit of an education session for some of those members. And then I think there's a few other areas here that are worth just touching on. The point around appointing the community or citizen members to the audit committee, I think, is an important one. From what we understood, the process, there was a staff committee which seemed to be led by the previous director of internal audit in appointing those citizen and community members. We would suggest that is probably switched around. I would suggest that while I think the audit committee chair and vice chair, and I think members of the committee did have some opportunity to meet with the citizen members, we would suggest that really that is led through the audit committee chair and vice chair in appointing those members to the audit committee. Just making sure again that there is that kind of alignment with what the committee needs and requires in terms of support and skills and everything else from there as well. Then there's a few other areas here really focusing on just really some of the more administrative elements of it, the declarations, some signed acknowledgement from staff indicating they've read and understood the manual. Some of those are more kind of process improvement points. So I think nothing kind of significant there. And then in terms of just making sure that some key performance metrics from the Office of the Internal Auditor are included in their annual report as well. So I think that's really important in making sure that the audit committee understands some of the KPIs and the metrics being used to assess the internal audit function, and the committee should take its comfort and assurance that hopefully those metrics are being met or are on track to being met. Then there's a few other areas just towards the bottom of the page on page 60 around managing the internal audit function. So I do think these are more for the director to kind of take away and just make sure that are addressed, and really some process improvement points for Sunny and the team to take away and really enhance the overall management of the function. I do know obviously staffing is an issue. It's not always easy to find internal auditors, particularly in the municipal world. So getting that full complement of staff back and getting the necessary support for Sunny and the team is really, really important. And I know Sunny is actively working on that at this point in time. Audit planning was another area that I think is an important area for consideration. I would like to have seen a little bit more documentation around how the previous internal audit plans have been prepared, the risk assessments, and those kinds of things. So I do think that there is some work, and I know Sunny is already kind of taking this away and beginning to think about this, but really developing the next internal audit plan is going to require a full risk assessment in making sure that internal audit plan is focused in the right areas. And then the final area here, sorry, there's two more areas. Performing the audits, again, this is more for Sunny and the team, but making sure that all those kind of requirements and standards, there are many, many standards that have to be met. Just making sure that all of those are signed off and approved, and just making sure that the team are fully aware of all of the requirements of the standards here, I think will be important. But most of these are really just process points for the internal audit team. And then finally, the reporting element here. So really just making sure that, I think when we did a review of the reports that had been prepared previously, it was really kind of trying to find ways to make those reports a little bit more reader friendly, making them a bit more concise, really, straight to the point of kind of what are the issues, what are the recommendations here, what do we really need to be concerned about, either as management or as the audit committee. Well, what are the real things that we need to understand from this audit report? So I would be, encouraging Sunny and the team to really focus on that reporting element to be able to draw out the key highlights from the reports as well. So that is a summary, a very brief summary of some of the findings. I'm absolutely delighted, happy to take questions on anything within our report or anything else in relation to the function as well.
Thanks so much, Nick. Councillor Bowman.
Thank you very much. Through you, Madam Chair. Nick, I'm just wondering, is 1.5% statistically, is that acceptable in the audit world to make conclusions based on that? So if we sample 1.5% of something and we come to our conclusions, is that acceptable?
Over to staff or to Nick.
Sorry, my apologies. That's a very difficult question to answer without knowing the context of what the 1.5% is. In some cases, it could well be sufficient to form a conclusion from an internal audit perspective. It really depends on the scope of the internal audit, and it depends on what is being considered. So you can, if it's transactional from a financial perspective, if it's 1.5% of the total number of transactions, that could equate to 90% of the value of the transactions. So that could well be sufficient to form a conclusion over financial data, but it really depends on what is being asked and what is being audited. Sorry.
Okay, in this, thank you. In this case, it's our contracts and our tenders. We audited 26 of 1,615 to come to our conclusion that things are good.
So I don't know what the value of those 26 are, but if it comes, if it could form usually the auditors would take a kind of a risk-based approach, and often that is depending on the audit in question and the subject matter, it would usually lead you to the higher value contracts and transactions. So I wouldn't just be looking at it as a number of transactions or number of contracts. I would be also looking at the value of the contracts as a percentage of the total value of the population of those contracts.
Okay, and that may be an area of concern that I have, because you know, in purchasing and tenders and bids, the values of the contracts can go very, very high. And if we audit, you know, a couple of those that are in the $1 million range, and the majority of all our tenders and bids and quotes are in the $50,000 range to $100,000 range, I would have questions about that. But I'll leave that with you guys. The date is there. Like I said, 26 of 1,600 doesn't seem like a lot to me, but you know, I've got to trust, I guess, what you guys say. Thanks.
Thanks, Councillor Bowman. I have a question from Mr. Iqbal. Iqbal, did you have another question?
Iqbal, your microphone is muted. If you can just unmute it, please. There you go.
So thanks, Nick. My question is that when I looked at the assessment summary, there are 16 standards that are assessed as partially conforms, right? So what exactly the planning is that there will be further review to ensure that those are all in full compliance, and we'll report back to Audit Committee?
So I would say we've developed a number of actions and suggested recommendations in order to get to what we believe would get you to a point of generally conforms. I believe at that point it would be for Sunny to come back to you, or the Director of Internal Audits come back to you and confirm that the actions have been completed as necessary. Of course, at a later date we'd be happy to come and do a short piece of work to maybe confirm that for you if you required that external view. But I believe my suggested next step would be to have the Director of Internal Audit come back to the committee with an update on progress, and maybe setting out an action plan in terms of when dates, when each action would be completed by to get you to that necessary state.
Okay, thanks.
Thank you so much. And I just have one quick question for Nick. Under the governance of the IA function for key recommendations, there's reference to the Audit Committee Chair and Vice Chair should take the lead in appointing community members to the Audit Committee. I know that the former Director of Internal Audit was the one who recommended the citizen members for the Audit Committee. Is that an unusual case? I'm just curious about this particular recommendation, and it just triggered a thought that the Audit Committee, I think, is the only committee where the Citizen Appointments Committee from Council do not appoint the citizens on the committee. So it just triggered that. Anyway, Nick, if you could comment, that would be great.
Yeah, I think from what we did think it was a little unusual for the director to kind of be at least involved, or the director of internal audit to be involved or leading that process on the staff side. I do think it. Yeah, I think if there is another avenue through council, I would recommend that. As I said, I think you've got I think the three. I think it's three citizen members and a further appointee as well. They. From what I've seen, they have, they're very, very qualified individuals to be part of this committee. But I do think that process maybe should be moved through the other process, if that's possible to do so.
Okay, thank you so much. Do any members have further comments?
Yeah, so I do have, can I have?
Go ahead.
Okay. So just to recall from my memory of my appointment, how it went through, there was an interview with the chair of the audit committee that I met before I was confirmed that I'm going to be appointed. So I think that process is there, but it's good to have the process more transparent. But I just want to confirm that there was a process that I had an interview with the chair of the audit committee as well before my appointment.
Okay, thank you, Iqbal, for reminding all of us. That's great. Thank you. Okay, if there are no further questions, we have a motion moved by Councillor Singh that the report titled Quality Assurance Review of the Internal Audit Function 2020 Audit Committee meeting of September 8th be received. Mr. Clerk, can you just clarify that that includes any recommendations in the report as well?
Through you, Madam Chair, it does not. All it's doing is receiving the report, unless there's a deliberative motion to request the Director of Internal Audit to report back, or the Director of Internal Audit just acknowledges that she will report back in due course on the assessment that's undertaken and those that partially conform in terms of what steps will be taken.
So just for clarity, if Sunny is there, can you just confirm that the recommendations will be reported back to Audit Committee? That would be awesome.
Yes, through the chair, I have given my commitment in writing that in the first meeting of 2021, I will present the plan, what the recommendations are. Some of them require resources, and then as we progress every quarter along with management action plan, that will be our management action plans update, and I will keep reporting until they are done.
Okay, thank you so much, Sunny. So if there is no one opposed to this particular motion, your voice will count in the affirmative. I don't see any opposition, so that motion carries. Moving on back to item number 6.1, the Internal Audit Charter. Councillor Singh.
Yeah, so I'll move this, but I'd like to make an amendment. I heard from Nick, and that's something we used to do at the school board as well. And I hope some of the other members also support this, is that we meet with the auditor in camera in every meeting. Alone, so we can probe further if we have additional questions or concerns. We used to do that at the school board too, and I think it's just good practice. And I would also like to, maybe I'll wait about an amendment, or I was thinking of just doing it right now, that and the appointments for the audit committee come through the citizen committee that we have already created. I think that is the better process. So if my peers are okay, I'd like to maybe just add that amendment right now in here and get it done with.
So through you, Mr.
Which has proper council representation, run through the clerk's office, and I have faith in that process.
So through you, Madam Chair, I just wish to advise on the recommendation proposed number 3 in terms of an opportunity to meet in closed session with the Director of Internal Audit. Any closed session deliberations have to be in keeping with the Municipal Act provision, so it would have to be tied to a specific open meeting exception. And as long as it meets that test, then that would be appropriate. So I just want to make sure that that's clear.
Fair enough.
Okay, and then I believe Councillor Singh had an amendment, which would be number 4, that the citizen members, and that would not apply to this particular term of the audit committee, but I guess Councillor Singh, you're saying moving forward, the citizen members are appointed by the Citizen Appointments Committee of Council?
Yeah. For the future, Ali, not this term at all. Just want to clarify, just moving forward. So after this term.
That would be the other amendment.
Yeah.
Okay, while we're waiting for that, do any members of the committee have any further comments or questions regarding the motion on the screen relating to the internal audit charter?
I have to speak. Can I have the photo on item number 6.1?
Okay, go ahead, Mr. Ali, and the clerk will just finish up that one amendment that Councillor Singh had suggested.
So on the item number 6.1, I still have the concerns that the proposal that brought forward and been debated right now at the audit committee significantly shifts the responsibilities from the audit committee and compromises the independence. So I would, and also it is also the expectation of the city council is also to get an independent audit reports. And by taking away the appointments, dismissals, and remuneration from the audit committee to the CEO compromises that independence. So on that note, I will not be supporting this report that is in front of us, this audit committee.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Ali, for your comments. So I think that Mr. Clerk is finishing up that amendment. So amendment number 4, that future citizen members be selected through the Citizen Appointments Committee. Okay, so members of council, you have the motion before you relating to the internal audit charter, item 6.1. If you are opposed, please make note in the chat box that you are opposed. I see Councillor Bowman is opposed. And I see Mr. Ali is opposed. And do all other members of council support this motion? If you do not write opposed, then I will take it that you are in support. Okay, so there are 2 opposed and 4 in favor, and that motion carries. Thank you very much, members of committee. Our next item on the agenda is item number 6.2. Staff report regarding driver certification program. Do any members of council have questions related to this report? I don't see any questions. Okay, seeing none. I have a motion moved by, can I have Mr. Iqbal? Would you be okay to move this motion? Motion moved by member Ali, that the report titled, okay, thank you. Driver certification programs, specified procedures, inspection, compliance, audits, fleet and fare, and emergency services to the audit committee meeting of September 8th be received. Thank you very much, Mr. Iqbal. If you do not oppose on the chat box, then that your vote will count in the affirmative. I see no opposition to 6.2, so that motion carries. Our next item of the agenda is 6.3, a staff report regarding corporate fraud prevention hotline update. To any members of council have any questions or comments relating to this staff report, please use that function. Mr. Ali, go ahead.
So the Q1 complaints received are somewhat serious in nature. So low morale and poor management, bullying and disrespectful behavior by the management, hiring practices, HR recruitment and political staff influence over hiring of city staff, and unauthorized purchases of safety shoes by forging signatures. So my question is that, are these complaints still under investigation? If so, would we expect a report to the next audit committee meeting?
Through the chair, this is Sunny Calcutt. Every report that comes, yes, it's investigated by internal audit, and if internal audit does not have expertise, then we go out and bring in expertise, for example, for the low morale. And also, I want you to keep in mind that this service we use, they have a certain particular categories, and sometimes the name might not fit that. For example, harm to people and low morale came from the same department, same report. So when we did the investigation, we went to HR. HR did hire a third party to come in, interview the staff, validate the concerns, and then come up with the action plans. So then HR and that department's management, they worked together and have the action plans being implemented as we speak. So yes, further to your point, on the safety issues, yes, we did investigate. We went all the way back to our vendors who are supplying. We looked at all the processes, all the transactions that happened. So we do a thorough investigation for every report that come in. Thank you.
Thank you, Sunny. Anything further, Mr. Ali?
No, nothing. Thanks.
Thank you so much. I see that there are no further questions. We have a motion moved by Councillor Medeiros, if that's okay with you, Councillor Medeiros, that the report titled Corporate Fraud Prevention
Yes, that's fine.
Thank you to the Audit Committee meeting of September 8th be received. If there's any opposition, please say so on the board. I see no opposition. That motion carries. We're now on item 6.4, a staff report regarding the contract awarding process audit. I see Councillor Singh has the question. Councillor Singh, go ahead.
Yes, I just actually kind of want to piggyback after Councillor Bowman's question regarding the sample size. Is this a report we're going to be, I do have concern about the 26 contracts, I guess, that were audited. So are we looking to do more? Because this is like a main area that we should always be continuously be auditing.
Through the chair, this is again Sunny Calcutt. Yes, definitely, to your point, this was a compliance audit. So what we did is, as the report explains, we divided our contracts into 4 categories, then looked at what's the compliance piece is included in each category, and we took some samples to make sure that the compliance is in. However, when we do the department audit, for example, right now we are doing our real estate management and business, building and construction audit, and we will be looking at lots of contracts. So the contracts will be looked by each department. For example, we are doing, we just finished transit audit. That report will be presented next quarter. And we did look at all their purchases contracts, if they have any service contracts, they are leasing for the tires. So we do look at it through each audit. We do look at sufficient amount of the contracts. This audit was particularly with each category, the compliance.
Okay, I get that. So when are the department audits expected to come? Is that the 2021 audit meeting?
Can you please repeat that?
When can we expect those reports from, I think I heard real estate and construction?
Yes, so those reports will be, we are trying November, but those are big audits, so I don't want to do any shortcut. Definitely first meeting of 2021. Transit audit will be presented to you next meeting in November for sure.
Okay, all right, thank you.
Thank you.
Any further questions on item 6.4? Being none, moved by Councillor Singh, that the report titled Contract Awarding Process Audit to the Audit Committee meeting of September 8th be received. If there's anyone opposed, please share in the chat function. I see no opposition. That motion carries. Item number 6.5 is a staff report regarding the status of management action plans, June 30th, 2020. Do any members have any questions or comments? Please use the chat box to let me know if you do. I see no questions or comments. I have a motion from Councillor Bowman, if that's okay with you. Motion from Councillor Bowman.
Yep.
That-
Yeah,
thank
no
you.
problem.
Thank you. That the report titled Status of Management Action Plans, June 30th, 2020 to the Audit Committee meeting of September 8th be received. Any opposition, please let me know in the chat box. Otherwise, your vote will count in the affirmative. I see no objections. That motion carries. Item 6.6, we've already dealt with earlier. Next item is 7, reports from finance. There are no reports. Item number 8, other new business. There is none. Item number 9, member question period. Do any members have any further questions regarding the audit committee matters? If so, please use the chat function to let me know. I see no further questions from members. Moving on to public question period. There is a 15-minute limit. I will ask the clerk if there are any questions submitted during the course of today's meeting.
Madam Chair, there have not.
Thank you, Mr. Clerk. The next item is item 11. A separate package regarding these agenda items were distributed to members of council and senior staff only. We will be going into closed session under item 11.1, which is the security of the property of the municipality or local board. Do any committee members wish to move into closed session to consider this matter or remain in open session and take a motion to acknowledge the item? Motion by Councillor Vicente to move in closed. So that the following closed session matter be acknowledged. 11.1 open session exemption under section 23(9)(2)(a) of the Municipal Act, the security of the property of the municipality or local board. Anyone opposed to moving in closed? Otherwise, we will be moving in closed. No opposition. Thank you. We are now going to go into closed session. And Mr. Clerk, if you could give us the instructions on how to do so.
So members of committee, we will need 10 minutes after recessing, and a separate email was sent to you just after noon today with the closed session WebEx link instructions. So you should have that to open the session. So we'll need about 10 minutes after the committee recesses to set up for closed session.
Okay, so we will reconvene in closed session at 4:27. Thank you very much.
So
Thank you very much, Mr. Clerk. In the continuing interest of transparency and open government, the clerk will help to report in public session any outcome from today's closed session business.
So, Madam Chair, members of committee, that Audit Committee went into closed session for the security of the property of the municipality or local board. The matter was considered and acknowledged, and no direction was given to staff.
Thank you very much, Mr. Clerk. Our final item of the business is adjournment. Committee is scheduled to meet Tuesday, November 24th, 2020 at 9:30 a.m. I have a motion from Councillor Vicente to adjourn today's meeting, that the Audit Committee do now adjourn to meet again for regular meeting on November 24th, 2020 at 9:30 a.m. or at the call of the chair. Is there anyone opposed to this motion? Otherwise, your vote will count in the affirmative. I don't think anyone opposes this one. That motion is carried, and we will see the committee again on November 24th. Thank you, everyone. Be well, be safe, practice physical distancing, wash your hands, and be well.